Hi, my name is Matt Bichelle, Director of Product Marketing here at Aerospike, and I'll be serving as the moderator for this session, Mastering Small Chunks of Data in High-Frequency Ad Tech Systems. Using Aerospike in high-frequency ad management systems for decision-making and ad delivery. Our presenter will be covering reasons why choosing Aerospike, what their circumstances were beforehand, and how they changed their architecture and operations model with Aerospike. But before I introduce our presenter, I'd like to remind you to please go ahead and enter your questions in the Q&A box. We'll have our presenter answer them at the end with us. Also, slides are available for download via that cloud icon, which is labeled Resources in Session. Our presenter is Thomas Peruzzi, CTO of Virtual Minds. Tom has more than 20 years in digital technology as an experienced CTO, angel investor, and advisor, a lecturer on innovation in technology, as he's an avowed tech lover. And apparently, he's also an occasional jury member. Tom has worked in different countries and continents for national and international companies. Tom's married, has 3 kids. There's a lot of sport, especially sailing. And he does this in order to keep his own work-life balance. So with that, I will hand it over to Tom. Please take it away.
Yeah, so welcome and thanks for being here, even if I'm currently sitting in Austria. So close to me, it's 9 p.m. in the evening, but yeah. So thanks for being with you. Thanks for having the chance to share what we have achieved with Aerospike in the past, and what we are currently doing, and what we are aiming for to go forward with Aerospike. And thanks for the frank words about me and my person. What I want to show you now is a little bit about who we are, what makes us a little bit special in our understanding, what are our learnings from using Aerospike, where we are coming from in general. So what are the software design patterns and the operations and development patterns we are coming from, and then a little bit hints and wishes when after 2 years working in an enterprise agreement with Aerospike, and a little bit what we want to do next together with Aerospike. And before jumping into that, a colleague of mine, Jonathan, had a presentation in 2019 about one of our company's edition and what they do with Aerospike. And what I want to show today is a little bit more, show you a little bit more insights what we're doing, and what KPIs we are going for, and a little bit more about some kind of soft changes we aimed to achieve when using Aerospike. And another short thanks before we start, it's a little bit to Aerospike Europe, especially to the team there, because they do a pretty awesome job. They do even more configuration than we do. Sometimes it feels like that, but they're really open and eager to support us best, and many thanks for that. Yeah, so I hope I can give you some really valuable insights over the next couple of hours, over the next 30 minutes. And in order to better understand what led us to Aerospike, I want to give you a short overview of what we are doing and where we are coming from. The company I'm working for currently as a board member, being responsible for technology and product, it's called Virtual Minds. And Virtual Minds, I don't want to say it's a small Google, because Google is much more valuable and ways larger. But what we have built in the past, and on a very homegrown approach, is we have built a full ad tech stack. And by doing so, we operate on all levels ad tech is working in. So 20 years ago, and that's really 20 years ago, we have started building the first digital publisher ad server in Germany, which was called the Edition ad server. On top of that Edition ecosystem, we've built several other things like a demand-side platform, which is called Active Agent, and we've invested in a supply-side platform called YieldWeb, and we support it in growth. And finally, we bought a DMP called the edX, which is the leading DMP in mid-Europe and in a little bit in the Scandinavics. And in 2017, when I joined, we bought AdClear, which is an attribution company. And what we never did during all the time, so you can imagine 20 years of homegrown means a little bit 20 years of tech debt on the one hand side, but it means too that we were driven by some approach like cash is king, So we were always quite cost sensitive in the past. And because it was not a typical VC case, it was a homegrown case. And in 2000, and a few years ago, it was bought by ProSieben, a private TV station and media company. And together with ProSieben, we got a little bit more power on media and content on the one hand side, and we were able to make use of some of the connections of such large media corporations. And to understand, we are homegrown. We mainly serve premium publishers and premium media companies in mid-Europe, especially in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. So that's a little bit our home base. And with the help of 200 people in product and technology, we have to master a quite radical number or quite aggressive number of queries per second, as you can imagine in the edtech space. So we are talking of up to 1 million requests per second when people switch on their connected TV devices, because we do a lot in the CTV area, and we always have to answer at scale and super fast. And that was one of the reasons why we went for Aerospike, but a little bit more on that later. Just two more things. We are driven by technology. We are a technology company. We love cutting edge technology, but we are not aiming for the nitty gritty hottest shit in town. So we are always aiming for cutting edge, stable, long-term relationships. We run a privacy by design that's a little bit based on the situation that we develop everything in Germany, we operate everything out of Germany, and we run and store everything in Germany. And finally, that's to understand better why we aim for Aerospike is we never aimed to become one big platform, which is more or less one, I don't want to say one monolith, but one platform. But what we were aiming for is to modularly combine those different entities and making use of the data which is generated on one place to the best of the user on another place. So we are quite heavily in data transactions between those companies whenever feasible, applicable, and okay by law. And that's a little bit where we're coming from. I'm on top. Virtual Minds is the holding, and as I said, I'm responsible for product and technology there. But now let's jump a little bit more into technology. So the lessons, I don't want to start with the internals first. I want to start with some lessons we've learned not only in the last 2 years of using Aerospike Enterprise, but in the last 5 years using Aerospike, because we started with the open source version first. What we've seen, and that happens quite often, then you have good technology in place, is that you start with one use case and more use cases pop up. And so we started, thanks God, we started with a pretty good use case in the tagging environment with Aerospike, and whatever, as it always happens when you do something good, more and more use cases are popping up, trying to make use of Aerospike technology, or of the technology which is really supportful, easy to use, easy to understand, good to maintain. And we are currently, after 2 years of the enterprise agreement, we are in a situation where we even have to stop them a little bit, because it's something like, you know, what MySQL was in the year 2000 is a little bit Aerospike now. Whenever we have to do something and store something, the first word that pops up is Aerospike. So we see tremendous use of different use cases, and we are key value lovers, and that's a little bit special to our use case too. The next thing is we are in a highly volatile environment, and speed is king. It's a little bit the faster the better. And for us, speed does not necessarily mean scaling vertically only. So scaling on a horizontal level with low-cost budget or low-cost budget servers, having good architecture in place which allows scaling is necessary to us. And we've seen that with Aerospike, and one reason we think that the speed is so good is the pure C approach, which is a pretty good argument for us because we are C lovers as well. So everything which is close to our ad server and which has to do with decision making or stuff like that is written in pure parallel C. On our side, so we like C, we love C, we understand C, we somehow talk C. So that's a little another argument for us using Aerospike as well. And then what we learned too is when you want to make use best of Aerospike, you have to understand the best practices which are close to using such a data store and somehow adopting the way you develop to the paradigms of the key value store, rather than trying to make the key value store fit into your software environment. And that took us, I think it took us around about 3 to 4 months to best understand how to make use of the best of Aerospike, and until that it's a set practice. And what we that's not generally just for Aerospike, but that's something in general we plan for the long run, and so we are always striving for something which can support us on the long run. And that's a little bit, we see key value in our business and in our use case is something which supports us for the long run. Hence we were aiming for a relationship, for a long-term relationship as well. And the last one, and even as important as the others, what we learned from using Aerospike is we are driven by efficiency, and we were, and I will talk about that a little bit later, we were quite heavy open source users only, but Aerospike Enterprise meets the goal to support our efficiency standards, because ad tech is a pretty tough place on some there. It is not even a cent place sometimes in technology, and cost per 1,000 ads delivered is below 1 cent. And so efficiency is king, and it really supports us there. And we learned how to make use of even an enterprise software to drive our efficiency. So when having a closer look, what we are doing with Aerospike, first a little bit of view what led to Aerospike, and there was a pretty good interview with Jonathan on that. So I want to, I don't want to say I want to recap that, I want to give you a little bit more insights, but generally saying, in the ad tech space, having high cardinality data, super volatile data, you have to be a microsecond freak, and I think ad tech is one of the last resource where you even have people counting CPU cycles for loops and stuff like that on certain levels. So we are really microsecond freaks. We are burning hard on getting everything done, and you have to understand that the time given to answer an ad request isn't increasing, so it's decreasing year by year, because it's an auction system and it's a competing environment. And in parallel, the number of data you're willing to make use of in one ad request is increasing by a factor of 2 or 3 over 1 or 2 years. So you have to find a balance between making use of more data, hence becoming faster. And so what we did, and we started that journey, as said, more or less, we started that journey towards a good, reliable system in 2011 already. And so we did everything from trying graph databases and stuff like that, because at the end, some of our use cases are graph-related use cases. But so we tested different solutions. We used different ones. Sometimes we even did some kind of A/B testing in a close to life or in a real life environment with some green-blue setups. And at the end, we first landed on Aerospike open source, and then we jumped to the enterprise later. And I will give you some insights about why we jumped to enterprise at the end. And as you can see on the graph, there is our request counter, where we on Aerospike counting the timeouts, and it explains a little bit that most of the green ones are most of them where we conserve the request to closer to 1 millisecond, and only a view between 10 and really just rare ones are above 50 milliseconds average for 2,500 requests per second on that cluster. And that's some kind of regular view, and that looks like the same at 5 a.m., 5 p.m. or at midnight. So the picture never changes somehow. So in order to make the right decision, we thought about, first of all, what patterns do we want to use and what patterns do we want to support. And so some kind of typical EdTech patterns is even if we have a lot of peaks and stuff like that, somehow we're quite predictable. We have a year-over-year growth in data of 30%, a year-over-year growth in auction requests of 30%, stuff like that. And what we had to learn is that what are the patterns which allow us to make use of super fast databases with and being able to handle that. And one pattern which sorted out was we have to scale through partitioning. That's somehow a little bit for sure, yes. And in order to do so, we had to embrace redundant and duplicated data. And that led us to, at one point, the question is, how do we query stuff which was a simple SQL thing, a join before, and our average KPI, which we even promised to customers, is below 5 milliseconds for 95% of all the data we do, and we store the data on disk and memory for restart scenarios as well. And as you can see in the graphs, it's a quite steady thing we are somehow serving, because you, at the end, you know your audiences, you know your agencies and advertisers, and it's a quite stable and quite balanced system at the end. So we have our growth and what we did. So the duplication supports us in managing more or less the I/O performance, which means that we have more loggers in parallel. And what we learned too, and that's one of, I don't want to say the bad patterns of our learning, is that the more you distribute the data and the more tough calculations you have, the more CPU intensive the calculations are, and that's something we learned to find a balance between crazy joins, which are easy to handle on SQL, and distributing the data to be super fast. So having those patterns in mind and those general patterns about our use cases, we thought about what kind of systems can we use. And so we more or less tested everything which you know from it was not only React and Cassandra. I want to say a little bit more on them, but it was Munin, it was Graphite, OpenTSDB, Ganglia, Influx, and a few more even. And I think the two most promising at the beginning, beside Aerospike, were on the one hand side React, but which we learned later was a little bit buggy, and the reaction to fix wasn't given in an appropriate manner for us. And the other one was Cassandra, but the read-write performance wasn't good enough for us, as you can see on the graph below. It was way too low. So we didn't meet our criteria, and so we even tested Mongo and Couch, so more or less all the usual suspects. But we ended up in using Aerospike a couple of years ago, and we started with tagging data and checking the behavior of the ad servers, and then we put more and more load on it, and finally we ended up still using Aerospike today. So where we use Aerospike today is, on the one hand side, we use it for tagging store, and tagging means you automatically tag users when they hit the ad server. Then you do some kind of real-time information flow to the data stores, and then you use the tag for things like, for example, retargeting, and that's the general use case. You should be able to retarget someone in below 5 seconds, And that's the tricky thing is we don't talk about 1 million profiles or 50 million profiles. We talk about 300 million profiles, where this has to happen in below 5 seconds for a tagging store. And the other standard use case is for which is called our DMP store, where all the segments of users are stored. And the segments explode with the more identities you use, either external identities or internals. And so we cyclically load the DMP store, and then we make use of the stored attributes for targeting within campaigns, and that has to happen in close to real time. And what we did in the last half a year is we switched our DSP, demand-side platform. The whole bidding process is now running on Aerospike as well. And I want to show you what happened to our new example, to our bidding example. The first thing we switched there is the matching between internal and external IDs. And so we use Aerospike there to map from external IDs from our partners to our internal users. So external IDs like third-party cookie IDs, first-party cookie IDs, stuff like that. We merge that information. And in that case, we benefit from the distributed locking, which is pretty awesome in Aerospike. And so we've never experienced any split brain problem or concurrency issues. And as you can see, it's the average external ID time, it's super low, and it's even lower than microseconds over the whole day, even during peaks. But we expect it to become a little bit more because we put more external IDs now on the system too. But currently we serve several 100 million mappings every day, and we can retrieve them in closer to 1 millisecond. The next use case is our budget control. So when you want to enter a console, you want to see what kind of budget did you spend already, what kind of budget are you willing to spend. And so we have budgets on several levels, like on the creative level, on the campaign level, on the order level, and on the customer level, and we want to show real-time spendings. And interesting to say is that for the long term, we run them on even MySQL and everything within the last 48 hours to really dig into on a very high level and on a very high detail. We are using Aerospike there, and it's the incredible scalability even in spikes. When we, like I said before, when we do activation campaigns after a TV spot, for example, we get 1 million QPS on top, and even that doesn't affect the budget control system. That's super important for our customers, and that's one of the latest use cases where we switched over to Aerospike. And finally, the last case is to show that whatever we did is, and thanks for the question which popped up, but I will come back. I will come close to that question in a second. Is as said before, we have a lot of traffic, and that traffic, and that's very important to understand. We didn't do anything on the setup of the servers for a very long time. We doubled our traffic, and without throttling and some logic, it would have been even 4 or 5 times higher. But we didn't do anything on memory and disk level on Aerospike, and it succeeded on the long run. So, in our understanding, the bidding case is a pretty good example for how to make use of Aerospike. And while I said at the beginning that we really love and embrace C, there's one specialty. Everything in the bidder, which I was telling you now for the last 5 minutes, is written in Java. And we have to say one thing. It's everything what Aerospike has done with regards to low garbage collection paradigms, Java performance paradigms, is a pretty good fit. So making use of the Java connector, it's super easy. It's no fancy boilerplate thingy in it. So our techs really love it. And there's really good functionality, like the retry and wait policies. And if we compare it to other Java Java connectors. It's pretty awesome what you did. And I always have to wait a little bit for the slides popping up. Sorry for that. And to show you one thing which is just a little bit about metrics. It's from our DSP bidding service. You see that currently there isn't too much data on it, but we will switch on the next generation of external identities. And then the problem with identities in the setup we are going forward is we always have 1 billion of identity mappings, and it somehow it grows exponentially. So we will see the systems looking like quite fully loaded in the next month, and then we will see what's going on. But we're pretty sure, because all our tests we've done before showed us that even with much more key value pairs in the system, we will not face any problem. But coming back to where we come from and what led us to Aerospike Enterprise, let me say a few more words on that. It's the first thing is generally we always used open source, but there were few reasons that led us to Aerospike Enterprise. The first thing was the unlimited nodes, which is pretty good for our low budget node use case, which runs in our data centers. The next thing is what we really embraced is the fast restart, the self-recovery after the loss of the power, and the cross data center replication. Because before, and that sounds a little bit funny maybe, but before, when we did this on open source only, we've built our own kind of cross data center replication. So we got rid of code by using the enterprise agreement, and we are aiming for the Kafka and Spark connectors. And before going forward, I shortly wanted to ask you what's your view on the cross data center replication, especially in a hybrid environment where you have on-premise setup and cloud setup. So it would be really helpful, because we are aiming for something like that. So maybe you can give us a short hint about how you want to go forward with that. Many thanks. So one more thing, Aerospike for us is not only a great database. As said before, we embraced open source, and we did everything with open source, and it was always something like, if there's a developer in place and we can make use of it, let's go for it, rather than thinking about do we really have to own that knowledge or not. And so with the introduction of Aerospike, we switched to a more make or buy like approach, which is pretty awesome for us. So we were aiming for even more for more systems, and Aerospike helped us because it was a good use case. Every technologist in our company likes it, and so now it's easier saying something like, hey, we've seen it with Aerospike that it really supports us. Don't you think there's anything else out there which can do the same job what Aerospike does on the data level for something else? And so that's a little bit a soft or a side effect, if you may call it like that. And maybe one thing which doesn't make our life easier, but to explain it a little bit, and that's answering one of the questions asked already, is we run everything on premise. So and in order to do so, we have our own data center provider, which is called Mylock. It's a data center provider serving around about 15,000 servers in Düsseldorf, in Germany, in 6 data centers. And in order to do ad tech, we have a low latency network. And you know, if you have a low latency network running, and you can see it with tons of peerings and stuff like that in Germany and in Europe, the next industry which pops up is either banking with hyper trading, or it's the gaming industry. So we have a few thousand servers running for gaming as well. And so we have enterprise hardware in use on premise with and everything is pretty automated, and we will end up with an on-prem and on hybrid cloud solution on top. That's what we are currently aiming for. So I don't want to say finally, but a little bit. So what makes for us the difference so how do we interact with Aerospike today? What's the difference to others? What we see is that the maintenance requirements are really super low. We don't have to do that permanent tuning, what you were used from other databases before, and regular calls with the Aerospike team for configuration checks and for showing us different use cases where else we can use it or make use of it in a better way, really support us to go to a close to zero maintenance effect. And that's what makes with the collaboration. And finally, before I'm running out of time, it's a little bit the question: what other use cases do we see with Aerospike or to make use of Aerospike? It's low latency, high speed decision storing and making. So everything we are currently aiming for with artificial intelligence or with machine learning approaches or deep learning approaches, the result is stored in key value pairs on Aerospike as well. The robust redundant key value storage, we think about no ops scenarios currently, and as said before, the distributed locking is a really strong feature, especially for companies like us. And one thing popped up. It's always a little bit the question when you ask the guys who are working with on the machine level, what makes the enterprise software so valuable? It's not this or that feature. More or less all of my operators ended up with voting for the dashboard. And so yes, we really embrace the dashboard of the enterprise edition. And we, I don't want to say we can't live without it anymore, but that's really super useful. You have everything you need in a second. You see the health stake, you see what's going on, where do you have to investigate further in a couple of seconds. And more or less finally, it's a little bit the question: what else are we aiming for with Aerospike in our environment? So currently we're aiming for Aerospike plus Kubernetes for easy deploy and maintain scenarios, especially in a hybrid setup. So like most of you, we have more and more Kubernetes running and making use of Aerospike in Kubernetes to distribute it super fast is one of the things which drives us currently. And the second thing is the Aerospike Kafka and Aerospike Spark deep integration, where we're currently in a testing proof of concept mode. And we do see as we're coming more or less from Spark, we more or less switch over to Kafka streams. And as Aerospike is more or less the fundament of everything, we're currently aiming for getting more insights on that as well. And that's what would be really interesting to me is whoever out there, if you have already experience with Kafka and Spark connector from Aerospike for in and outbound traffic, what's your view on that? Is it already doable at a million requests per second scale? Because that's what we are aiming for finally. So coming up to the end of my presentation, and I hope it was of interest to you, I want to sum up what we've learned and how we see Aerospike today in our EdTech environment. The first thing is we are efficiency driven, and what we learned is that Aerospike can be managed with a very super small team in operations, in QA. We have to handle something like data depth. So everything. So we have to make sure that everything that's in our data streams and data pipelines is exactly what we want it to be and how we understand it should look like. So some kind of functional and integration testing in our data, and it can be managed with a very small team in development as well. So it's a super handy tool. It's fast. It's reliable. Reliability is very important for us and our customers. And it scales pretty well. That makes it so valuable to us. You could even say it simply works as expected. And we, as said in the beginning, it is a really somehow it doesn't feel like a license agreement. It's a pretty good cooperation and partnership on tech as well as on business level with the guys from Aerospike Europe, and it really supports us in speeding up on tech and on the organizational level. So that's a little bit. So I hope I was able to explain you a little bit about what we are doing, what we are going for. where we use Aerospike, and why we think that Aerospike is good for high frequency ad tech systems, especially in our case for CTV traffic and display traffic on a pretty high volatile, high cardinality case. And so I hope it was of interest for you. I hope there was some valuable information to you. If there are any questions, feel free to ask them. And yeah, so the stage is yours. I think that's the right sentence.
I guess. Yeah. So again, yeah, this is Matt again. Fantastic presentation. So again, people listening in, go ahead and enter additional questions into the Q&A box. I guess the first question, I wasn't sure, Tom, if you answered it. So it's a two-parter. The first part is your service deployed on your own bare metal data center or a cloud provider?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. As said, our core provider is Mylog, which we own. That's if you own your own data center provider, then it's somehow obvious that you go for your own one. But we have to serve peaks and stuff like that, and bare metal is not the ideal choice for handling peaks. Only if you have enough money to have a few 10, 20, 100 servers on top of it. So currently we are aiming for a more hybrid setup, and we're going for a hybrid setup. This is why we have chosen to Kubernetify everything, even Aerospike. And currently we have our own feasibility study, proof of concept, where we run a hybrid setup. But maybe it's the right time for next year to tell you a little bit more about our experience in hybrid cloud setup for that kind of data. Currently, it looks pretty good. So we are quite satisfied, and we're still going forward. So there was no show blocker so far in thinking about a hybrid setup. But as said, the operational data currently is on premise only. So fully under our control.
Got it. Yeah, well, it makes sense going forward, and I do know that other Aerospike customers do exactly that for bursting. You mentioned a little bit about machine learning use cases. Could you elaborate a little bit about how Aerospike is supporting that?
Yeah, currently so that's why I'm interested in learning how others use the Spark and Kafka connector, because currently a lot of our machine learning, especially on the DMP level, where you have such use cases like finding siblings or lookalikes, so something like you have a segment of, I don't know, people who love white sneakers, and then the segment isn't large enough for a campaign, and you want to look for people or for user profiles which are close to the white sneaker lovers, and so that's one of the typical AI problems we are facing, and ideally you can do that in real time, so enriching segments with lookalikes or siblings, as they are called, and that's where we want to pass the data, which is processed currently on Spark, and it will be processed on Kafka Stream soon. And then it should be put into our key value store, into Aerospike, immediately when you have new insights, when you have generated new insights, because it fits pretty well into our key value setup, where a segment is represented by a segment ID, and then the relevant segment data is in the value part. So it would perfectly fit. It's just learning how to best make use of those connectors.
Yeah,
currently a little bit. What happens currently with all that COVID-19 thingy is we're a little bit slower in our lab setup.
Sure. Okay. Well, we are literally running out of time. So for any additional questions, we'll make sure, Tom, that they get routed to you via email, even for on-demand. The Q&A box will be available, again, as are Tom's slides. Tom, we really appreciate everyone in the Aerospike community does thank you for making this literally a global conference and from presenting late night from Austria. So we appreciate that. I've been advised by our Chief Product Officer encouraging people to attend at 2:30 Pacific time virtual happy hour. Might be a little late for you, Tom. If for those that haven't joined the Slack channel, and everyone is welcome, you can access that at tinyurl.com/join-aerospike-slack. So with that, Tom, thank you again, and everyone have a great rest of your conference.
Yeah, thanks for having the chance talking to you, and I wish you a good ongoing presentation. All the best. Bye-bye.